Imagine, um, imagine being crowned the absolute best in your entire continent at your job, like the undisputed master of what you do.
Right, years of just grinding and rising through the ranks.
Exactly. And finally, you get this golden ticket. You get a VIP invitation to perform on the biggest, most watched stage on planet Earth.
Oh, the 2026 World Cup.
Yeah, you pack your bags, your flight is booked. I mean, your whole home country is cheering you on. And then, without any real explanation, you are just turned away at the door by a border agent.
Wow, just like that.
Just like that. Your invitation is essentially revoked. And look, that's not a hypothetical scenario we made up for you. That is exactly what just happened to one of the world's top football referees ahead of the World Cup.
And, it's a scenario that completely shatters the whole illusion that these mega events try to project.
Mhm.
Because, I mean, when we look at FIFA, right, we are looking at this massive logistical behemoth.
Oh yeah, they operate almost like their own sovereign nation.
Exactly. They dictate terms to host countries, they demand tax exemptions, all of it. And their entire marketing machine is built on this promise of frictionless global togetherness.
Right, they sell the World Cup to you and me as this temporary suspension of geopolitics. Like
But-
everyone just gets along for a month.
But the reality of state borders, it doesn't care about FIFA's marketing. When a quasi-state entity like global soccer hits the absolute unyielding wall of U.S. sovereignty, that beautiful illusion of unity just shatters instantly.
It really does.
Yeah.
So today we're taking a deep dive into this profoundly sharp, explosive op-ed draft. It's titled America's World Cup Own Goal.
Which is such a great title.
It is. And this writer, they take this single, seemingly isolated visa denial of a Somali referee, and they basically weaponize it into this massive sweeping indictment of American statecraft.
Yeah, and this op-ed pulls absolutely zero punches. So,
We're impartially reporting on a deeply partisan, highly critical piece of writing.
exactly. Which means we really have to look directly at the incredibly sharp historical and political context the writer is using to build their case.
So let's start with the man caught in the middle of this geopolitical crossfire, Omar Abdukadir Artan. The piece really stresses that Artan is not a politician. He's not a propagandist or an activist.
He is basically the embodiment of neutrality. He's a referee.
Right, a guy whose entire professional existence literally relies on enforcing rules fairly for everyone else on the field.
And that neutrality as well, it's a crucial foundational block for the author's argument here, because Artan has been on the FIFA international list since 2018.
Wow, so a long time.
Yeah, and in 2025, he was actually named the Confederation of African Football's Men's Referee of the Year.
The best in Africa.
Exactly. He is a recognized master of his craft.
Mm.
But the op-ed argues that his identity as a Somali national is where the bureaucratic friction intentionally began.
Because the official line from the U.S. administration, like, the only excuse they gave for turning him away was this generic vetting concern.
A vague visa issue.
Yeah, and FIFA, despite all its power, just threw up its hands and said, well, we can't override the U.S. State Department.
Right.
Now, looking at the mechanics of international travel, I mean, visas get denied every single day for incredibly mundane reasons, right?
Mhm.
A typo on a form, an expired secondary document.
An overzealous border agent. Yeah.
Exactly. So why not just accept it?
Well, the author aggressively rejects the idea that this was just a mundane clerical error. And to understand why, you kind of have to look at what Artan represents as a symbol.
Okay, tell me more.
So Somalia is a nation that has been overwhelmingly reduced in the Western imagination to a very narrow set of stereotypes.
Right, like war, piracy, terrorism.
Exactly. But for Somalia, Artan represented something entirely different and honestly incredibly rare on the global stage. He represented discipline, excellence, and most importantly, normality.
Normality. That is a really fascinating metric here.
It is, right. The writer is arguing that a confident superpower should be eager to welcome the absolute best representative of a struggling nation. It validates the superpower's role as a, gracious global host.
But by slamming the door on him instead, the writer frames the act not as an administrative quirk, but as a calculated act of systemic pettiness.
And that perceived pettiness, it doesn't exist in a vacuum. The author connects this rejection directly to the political shadow cast by the current administration.
Which brings us to the core thesis of this op-ed. The author says you simply cannot separate this specific border decision from the explicit historical rhetoric of Donald Trump regarding Somali immigrants.
Yeah, the text makes this connection impossible to miss. They aren't just vaguely gesturing at a political vibe.
No, the author explicitly cites Donald Trump's past public remarks. They point to specific rallies and speeches where he plainly stated he did not want Somalis in the United States.
Right.
And they reference broader rhetoric where he described certain populations as, quote, garbage. The op-ed is pulling direct quotes to establish a pattern of hostility.
And the argument here relies on this concept of contamination.
Contamination.
Yeah. The writer asserts that when a leader spends years publicly and aggressively denigrating a specific nationality, those words fundamentally contaminate the bureaucracy operating beneath that leader.
Oh, wow.
Like, the public language hasn't merely criticized immigration policy, it has actually targeted Somali people as a demographic group.
Let me play devil's advocate for a second, though.
Oh.
Because, I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of someone reading this draft who might be skeptical.
Sure, go for it.
Border control systems are massively complex, they're archaic, And they're notoriously prone to algorithmic errors.
Oh, definitely.
Couldn't this just be, a guy named Omar Artan triggering a false positive on some 20-year-old watch list? Like, if two databases just fail to communicate, why does the author immediately escalate a potentially mundane IT failure into institutional malice?
That is a completely fair question, and the author actually anticipates that exact defense in the piece.
Oh, really? How do they counter it?
Their counter-argument is that in geopolitics, reality is entirely subordinate to optics.
Ah,
Yeah, a superpower requires the benefit of the doubt to function smoothly on the world stage. When your administrative systems glitch, allies usually just assume it was a glitch.
because they trust you.
Right. But the writer argues that when a leader has explicitly broadcast a prejudice against a specific group, the nation immediately forfeits that benefit of the doubt.
I see. So even if it was literally just a broken server or a mischecked box, the world is forced to read the action through the lens of the president's spoken prejudice.
Exactly. The rest of the globe looks at the situation and asks, is this neutral vetting or is this the institutional expression of a prejudice that the leader already promised to enforce?
You just can't divorce the administrative act from the political atmosphere.
Precisely. And because the U.S. left that massive diplomatic vacuum by pushing Artan away, another global power center immediately saw an opportunity to fill it.
Oh, the fallout is arguably the most fascinating part of the entire piece, because Artan didn't just, fade into obscurity after the U.S. denied his visa.
Not at all.
The text outlines how he flew back to an absolute hero's welcome in Somalia, and then UEFA, which governs European football and rivals FIFA in prestige, they swooped right in.
They wasted no time.
None. They immediately appointed Artan to officiate the 2026 Super Cup.
It's a textbook example of the law of unintended consequences. And the author uses this to pivot from a critique of domestic politics to a critique of global strategy.
Because the U.S. administration might have intended this visa denial as a show of toughness, right? Like a signal to its base about strict border control.
Exactly. But instead, it manifested on the international stage as weakness and insecurity.
It's geopolitical judo.
It really is.
UEFA didn't have to spend billions of dollars building infrastructure or, hosting a massive summit to look like the good guys.
What?
They literally just had to spend the price of a single plane ticket and offer a hotel room to one highly qualified referee.
And by doing so, Europe weaponized American administrative friction to make themselves look incredibly magnanimous, while making the U.S. look, frankly, embarrassingly small by comparison.
And that is exactly the mechanism of how diplomatic leverage is lost. Europe turned an American embarrassment into a European gesture of solidarity.
The man the United States wouldn't admit was elevated and placed on another wildly prestigious stage.
Right.
The author notes that the attempted humiliation of the referee completely failed, but the reputational damage to the United States locked in immediately.
The U.S. took all the reputational damage of being the rigid, unwelcoming bad guy and gained absolutely zero strategic advantage in return.
None at all.
Which points to the author's much deeper structural critique, that the current administration fundamentally misunderstands the mechanics of soft power.
Yeah, and the op-ed asks a series of very pointed questions to illustrate this misunderstanding, like, did excluding one African referee make America safer?
No.
Did it make the economy richer? Did it advance U.S. diplomatic interests in the Horn of Africa or strengthen military alliances?
A resounding zero across the board.
Exactly.
Which means the administration traded actual diplomatic capital for a fleeting moment of performative cruelty. The piece actually goes out of its way to redefine soft power for you, the reader.
How do they define it?
They argue that soft power isn't just sentimental decoration. It isn't just the fact that people in other countries watch Hollywood movies or listen to American pop music.
Right. The author defines soft power as strategic infrastructure.
Strategic infrastructure.
Yeah. If we look at how this actually functions, soft power is the diplomatic lubrication that makes hard power easier to deploy.
That makes a lot of sense.
When the global public believes a nation is competent, fair, open, and reliable, well, that nation's diplomats have a much easier time negotiating trade tariffs or securing military basing rights or building coalitions.
But when a country appears erratic and petty,
every single international negotiation becomes mechanically harder because trust and predictability are gone.
To really drive this home, the writer makes a highly provocative comparison. They contrast the United States hosting the 2026 World Cup with the Beijing Olympics and the Russia World Cup.
Wow, that is a heavy contrast.
It really is. But the author explicitly acknowledges the nature of those regimes, like the Kremlin's brutality, China's authoritarian politics, but notes that even those nations understood the geopolitical assignment of hosting a global event.
They read the sports washing manual and executed it flawlessly.
Exactly. They used those multi-billion-dollar stages to project frictionless competence. They signaled to the global community that, regardless of what happens behind closed doors, they possess the national capacity in order to be reliable hosts.
They projected strength through hospitality.
Yes. By contrast, the author's most biting critique is that the United States is currently treating its turn on the global stage like reality television.
Chaos, vendetta, insult, and spectacle.
Right. And reality TV dynamics are brilliant for domestic political rallies, They keep a specific base energized, angry, and tuned in.
But the op-ed argues that those exact same ingredients are toxic for statecraft.
Allies and international partners don't want cliffhangers.
No, they don't want plot twists either. They require stability. A serious superpower understands that power isn't just coercion, it's attraction.
It is a measure not just of who you can forcibly keep out of your borders, but who actually aspires to come in.
And this transition from the mechanics of soft power leads directly to the author's sobering conclusion about national decline.
Moving away from the specific incident with the referee and looking at the grand strategy of a superpower.
Exactly. The author frames this dynamic as a paradox of insecurity.
And the irony the writer highlights is brutal. They argue that a political movement whose entire slogan is based on making the country great again appears systematically determined to make the country look incredibly small.
Yeah, because a nation with unmatched cultural reach, the world's reserve currency, technological dominance, and a vast diplomatic network. I mean, they should not feel threatened by the presence of a single Somali referee.
It defies the logic of scale.
It really does.
It's like a corporate titan screaming at a barista in a coffee shop.
That's a great analogy.
Even if somehow the titan is technically correct about the coffee order, just the simple visual act of screaming down at someone so far below their weight class instantly strips away their aura of power.
A true heavyweight shouldn't need a petty victory over a purely symbolic individual.
Right. The author points out that magnanimity is the ultimate signal of strength. You prove you are big by showing you are big enough to let things go and welcome the world.
Instead, the op-ed asserts that the administration mistakes cruelty for seriousness, drama for strategy, and grievance for national interest.
Cruelty for seriousness.
Yeah, when a government confuses the ability to inflict administrative pain with the projection of actual strength, it just begins to hollow out its own influence.
Cruelty for seriousness. That is such a devastating line.
Yeah.
And it builds perfectly to what the author titles the ultimate own goal.
The final warning.
Yes. The writer is issuing a final warning about the mechanics of how empires actually lose their standing.
Because we often visualize national decline as this, cinematic collapse, right? A massive military defeat, an invasion, or a sudden catastrophic bankruptcy.
But the author argues that the erosion of a superpower is much more insidious. It happens through 1,000 cheap own goals.
I love that phrase.
These are actions that are loudly, enthusiastically applauded by a domestic audience. An audience that is so completely consumed by its own internal grievances, so addicted to the reality TV drama of its own politics, that it completely fails to realize the rest of the globe is watching.
And judging. The world doesn't stop spinning because one nation decides to close its doors.
No.
As we saw with UEFA stepping in to hire Artan, the excellence will simply be recognized elsewhere. Global institutions will find workarounds.
They always do.
The international community will build new stages, they'll form new alliances, and gradually learn to road around the friction.
So the nation that chooses to prioritize performative exclusion over global leadership won't necessarily be destroyed overnight. It will just be left behind, looking small and isolated.
Exactly.
We started this deep dive looking at one missing name on a referee roster for the World Cup. But through the aggressive, unsparing lens of this op-ed, we've explored how a single denied visa acts as an X-ray.
It reveals a massive structural shift in American soft power.
Yes. The contamination of bureaucracy by political rhetoric, and the quiet, everyday mechanics of superpower decline.
And it forces us to confront a highly uncomfortable reality about our hyper-interconnected world. Today, a local bureaucratic act in an airport terminal can instantaneously become a global headline, shifting diplomatic leverage thousands of miles away.
It really can.
So it leaves a critical question for you to consider long after we wrap up today. If a nation's domestic political survival increasingly relies on performative exclusions that actively damage its international reputation, at what point does a superpower's internal politics make it literally impossible to effectively lead on the global stage?
Can you be the host of the world's biggest party if your political brand relies on picking fights at the front door? The World Cup promises a clean, perfectly unifying vision of the globe coming together. But when you introduce the murky, chaotic reality of domestic grievance politics, you don't get unity, you just get a vacuum.
And nature abhors a vacuum.
Exactly. And as we saw today, there is always another power waiting to fill that vacuum. And welcome the guests you turned away. Keep questioning the bigger picture behind the headlines. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.